All right, so we're going to talk about gear in just a second, but first let's take a moment to appreciate no more braces. Just a little under a year and 4 months after I got them on, they are off now. I wouldn't say I miss it, but it is one of the most worthwhile things I've done. So definitely glad to have those gone. So let's talk a little bit about vlogging and the gear I use while vlogging and backpacking. Now it presents its own unique challenges. A lot of times you're off the grid, so you've got to think about power. Sometimes you're in less than ideal conditions, so you've got to think about weather sealing and not ruining your gear while you're trying to tell the story. Also, you're packing everything in with you, so weight becomes more of a consideration, more than if you're just vlogging around your house. Now, I've tried just about every system out there. The only thing I haven't tried that's very popular is the Canon G7X, G7X Mark II, or the Sony equivalent. I think it's like the A6600 now, the compact cameras. I haven't tried those. I'll get into a little bit more why I haven't in just a little bit. But I think my system now is a pretty good compromise as far as balancing weight, portability versus getting the best quality possible. But before I get into what I'm using now, I want to kind of review the systems I've used over the years. Started back in 2015, I think, in the Smoky Mountains. I still remember that first video of me talking into my GoPro, and it was so awkward just trying to think of what to say. I still have those awkward moments from time to time. In fact, this is my second take on this video. But as I mentioned, I started with a GoPro. I think I used the Hero 2 for my first few videos. This is the Hero 3 Black Edition. But yeah, just something like this on a Steadicam, and it actually allowed for some pretty cool shots. The Steadicam was very, very steady. It did its job, and you could also, if you locked in your elbow, it's kind of hard to see, but if you locked in your elbow at your side, you could really get kind of a smooth pan. So it was versatile in that way. It allows for some really smooth hiking shots. Couple of downsides though. With GoPro you're dealing with just continuous automatic exposure. So really I was at the mercy of whatever the camera was showing me. Second, with this thing, it's very precise. These knobs here balance the weight front and back and left to right. So once you got it perfectly balanced for like the point of view hiking shots, if you wanted to flip the camera around and do talking to the camera, you would have to completely rebalance it. This Steadicam, the weight down here in its shape is incredibly awkward to store and to carry along with you. What I ended up doing was it has this little clip that I just dropped in the floor, but I would clip it onto my chest strap of my backpack and it would dangle like that. But then as you were hiking, it would start to bounce. So I'd have to tie in the lower part. It was just a hassle. This part, the gimbal, got bent in my checked luggage one time. The biggest issue with it though is audio. GoPro audio is terrible, as I think we all know by now. So in order to not have to use that audio, what I did was I picked up a one of these Zoom ones, or H1 Zoom, just a little pocket recorder, and I've got a lav mic that my kids have so lovingly misplaced for me, but that was a giant squid Omni lav mic. So I would stick this in my pocket, hit the record button, turn the GoPro on, hit the record button, snap, so I could line it up in post, and then I would have decent talking audio, but if you wanted, the real problem was if you wanted any ambient, like if you were just recording the like a river or something and you wanted just ambient noise, there was no really convenient way unless I just kind of held this and made a separate audio recording. So that got to be a big hassle. So the limitations in exposure and audio really forced me to look elsewhere. And on hand I had this beast, the 5D Mark III and a 16-35. And the first hike I did with that was again in the Smokies, and I just handheld it out like this, talked to it, and it's so heavy that if you'll notice in the video, I forget which video it was, I think it was to maybe Indian Flats Falls. I don't remember the exact video, but at the beginning of the video, I'm perfectly framed because my muscles aren't tired. And by the end, like my head is cut off because it was so heavy. But this really upped the video quality. Obviously, manual exposure video, I can control that. I also eventually switched over from my lav mic to the mic that you're listening through right now, the Rode Video Mic Pro. And I feel like this was a big step forward, even though it was very, very heavy. It improved the quality of my video. But after that first video, I knew how to do a few things as far as weight goes, because I just couldn't handhold this. It was ridiculous. So I did two things. Okay, first, for convenience sake, I got maybe the goofiest looking piece of gear of all time. It is the Ribs front pack. And what it lacks in style, it most certainly makes up for in functionality. Whenever I'm hiking, this Ribs front pack, it's kind of hard to see. So the front pack, you put it on first, and then your backpack goes over the top of that. And it perfectly fits, the large size perfectly fits the 5D and the 16-35 lens. So I would store that there, and whenever I needed to break out my camera, instead of having to undo that whole GoPro rig, I would just unzip it and be ready to go. The second thing that I started doing to manage weight was I got one of these tiny little, it's a carbon fiber tripod, and I would put the camera on, extend two of the legs, and anchor those against my waist. And that way it was supported out here, so I could just talk to it, and that way I wouldn't have to rely on my muscles getting tired. So the 5D Mark III, switching to that was a big step up in quality, but it had two limitations that were starting to really bother me. First was no articulating screen. I couldn't see what I was recording. Now, most of the time I would just put my center focus on. I've got back button focus set, so I would focus back here, aim it at me, and just hope that I was on that center spot. I hit it about 9 times out of 10, but yeah, those ones that I didn't hit were so annoying. It'd be focused like a mile behind me. So I really started to realize I was going to need something with an articulating screen. Furthermore, the second limitation of this was that it was full frame. Now, when I'm hiking and talking to the camera, I found that the perfect focal length is right about 24 millimeters. Well, this 16-35, the 16-24 part was really just extra focal length that I didn't need. It was overkill. So this lens was starting to become an issue because it had a lot of wasted focal length on there, and it wasn't the best at focusing. I found that out a little bit later on. So I tried first a Canon Rebel SL1. Now that fixed the full frame problem, but still no articulating screen. So I sold that after I think I made one trip. Zion 2015, maybe I recorded on that. No, it was last year. It was 2016's trip. And so I had several shots where it was focused a mile behind me. So sold that on eBay and got the Canon Rebel T5i, which had the articulating screen. That was perfect, but the limitation with that was the lens. I was just so sick and tired of this lens. It was always hunting for focus when I needed it to be in continuous focus. So I started to realize that I needed a completely separate system. And that is when I went to the system that I have right now. You can't see it though, so I'm going to switch to the 5D to record this. Okay, hope I'm in focus. I have no way to know because no articulating screen, and the audio is terrible. I apologize for that. But this is the setup I use now. I've completely bought into the Casey Neistat Kool-Aid. We've got the curved GorillaPod. Camera is the Panasonic Lumix G7. Microphone, as I mentioned, is the Rode Video Mic Pro. Now, why I love this setup, like I said, I think it's the perfect compromise for me as far as blending together portability, weight, convenience, and quality of video. Let's start with convenience first. I was getting really tired of grabbing the tripod from my side. It was on the outside of my pack, but still I'd have to grab it, extend the legs, get the angle of the tripod head correct, make sure everything was good when it was anchored to my hips. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're having to do it, you know, several times throughout a hike, that gets really old really quickly. The GorillaPod, perfect compromise for that. The curving it gets the camera further away from my body, but I can still anchor my elbow to my side and have it relatively stable. It's also much more convenient to grab. I can stick it in my front pack, just pull it out, attach the camera, and I'm good to go. I don't have to worry as much about fiddling with the angle. It's completely set up. Don't have to extend the legs, they're always set. Camera itself, this is a micro 4/3 camera. It's got a 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8 lens. That is a 24-70 equivalent, so perfect focal length. I'm using the full range of focal length. That wide is really good to talk to, and then if I need B-roll, I've got the 24-70 millimeters to work with. It's the little brother to their GH4. It does not have in-camera stabilization. It's made out of plastic, which is actually good for me. It reduces the weight. It doesn't have quite the weather sealing, so it's not going to be as durable in rain, so I've got to be a little bit careful with that, but really just an ideal camera. And on top, got the Rode VideoMic Pro, like I've mentioned before, with a dead cat on it. Now, the reason I haven't switched over or tried the small compact, just point and shoot like the G7X from Canon, is the microphone. I don't want to have to rely on in-camera audio, and with those you can't attach an external mic. So you're hearing now how bad in-camera audio is. So for me, the quality this brings is worth the little bit exercise, but really it's a pretty lightweight setup. Gives good, pretty decent autofocus. I wouldn't call it great, but it's pretty good. And yeah, just the perfect setup for what I need. So I'm going to put this camera back on, and let's talk about a few of the other accessories and other cameras I use. Alright, glad to be back. Glad to be able to see myself in that articulating screen again. So that is my main camera. It's what I talk to. I do a lot of B-roll with that, but also carry several other cameras with me. Starting with the trusty GoPro. Again, this is the Hero 3 Plus Black Edition. I use this for a lot of B-roll, and actually I found that you can get it pretty stable if like you anchor it to your chin or chest, and then you can do a panning motion. You can get some pretty cool shots with that. Mostly I use it just for time-lapse though. I record video at 2.7K, which, by the way, that sharpens it a lot compared to if you take 2.7K video, down-res it to 1080, you'll get a much clearer picture as opposed to just recording in 1080. So anyway, I'll record video and just speed it up if I need a time lapse. If I need any movement in my time lapse, I've got an egg timer. Occasionally I'll throw that in the pack. Not too often though. Most of the time I just carry it with this micro GorillaPod. That way I can have something to hold it if I need to. I can wrap it around a tree branch to get some hiking shots if I need to. Really pretty versatile, and yeah, it's lightweight and goes in the pack with me. I've started using my cell phone a lot too recently for slow motion. Just an iPhone 6S does really good 1080 slow motion. It's 120 frames a second, so I can slow it down to a quarter of the speed. And like you've seen in my recent videos, like I'll slow a river down. That's all handheld, by the way. I'll just handhold about a 6-second clip, and then because you're recording it in slow motion, there's no movement. So I've started using that a lot. Okay, by far my favorite B-roll camera is the Mavic. I know you guys, the drone only videos don't get a lot of views, but adding a little drone footage to a backpacking video, little B-roll, I think is just fascinating. I love the drone videos. This is small enough to where if I'm not backpacking in a national park and I want to take it with me, again, I can stick it in the pocket of the ribs front pack. I can throw a few batteries in there and a controller. Not the lightest thing in the world, but for me, I think the footage that it gets is well worth the additional weight. Now, I talked about power in the field. Sometimes you'll be off the grid for several days, weeks even, if you do through hikes and things like that. So I always carry multiple batteries. For my GoPro, I've got 4 batteries. And while we're talking about batteries, I want to give you guys a little tip. This is going to be a little bit hard to see here. Okay, so you see the number 1 there? Now if I flip it over, see the number 2. Always number your batteries. That way you'll know you won't be using the same batteries over and over again, and when you throw a dead one in the bag, you'll know the next one to get. So always number your batteries. But yeah, for the GoPro, I have 4 batteries. For the Lumix, I've got 3. And for these, I always just buy these cheap off-brand batteries off of Amazon. They are really not as good a quality, but they're not that far off. And for as many batteries as I'm buying, the savings is worth it. Now, that stash of batteries will last me for an overnight trip. But if I need to go longer, I'm going to need a way to charge these. So, as far as external power in the field, I've got a couple of options. This is the GoZero Flip 30. It will give me about 2 to 3 cell phone charges and a couple of camera battery charges. Now I always buy with the batteries just these little cheap USB chargers. It's got like a micro connection on one end. Plug it up there, plug it to the charger, plug it to the charger at the other end, and you can see it's charging. They are very cheap, but so far, knock on wood, very reliable. If I'm doing 2 to 3 nights, I'll take this with me. If I need to go longer, I've got the relatively new Venture 70. This is about a 70 watt-hour battery. It's over got twice as much power as the Flip 30. So really robust charger. This will give me several days worth of charges out of it. I'm a bit hesitant to fully recommend this because I'm actually on my second one. The first one, it charged fully for about a week and then it just refused to go beyond 80%. So don't know if I just had a glitchy model. Hopefully that was it. I've had good luck with GoZero products in the past. So I'm on my second one now. Customer service was great. They just said return it. We'll get you a new one. So far so good with this one, but I'm going to fully test it and then I may do a review for you guys later on. So for longer trips, even the Venture 70 is not going to last all trip long. I need a way to recharge that. And that's when their solar panels come in. This is the GoZero Nomad 13. It's a 13 watt panel. It will fully charge the Flip 30 in a day. It takes about 2 full days of good sun to charge the Venture 70. But as long as I'm not using a ton of battery, this combined with the Venture 70 will keep up with the trip for an entire trip. Okay, last little bit here, just some accessories. Neutral density filters for video, going to be very important. These are Polar Pro filters for the drone and a Tiffin 4-stop filter for the Lumix. This is so in bright light you can't really adjust your shutter speed as much. It's kind of locked in place. So in bright light you've got to really darken your scene if you want to be able to shoot at wide open apertures. So with the 4-stop filter, I use that with a Panasonic because their base ISO is 200, so it's a tad brighter than like Canon's base ISO. So that's why I went with a 4-stop over a 3-stop. Anyway, there's a lot of gear that I've tried, failed, some I've kept, some I've sold on eBay. But hopefully that gives you guys kind of a clear picture of the options that are out there, some good qualities of different systems I've used as well as bad qualities about them. And I see myself using this G7 setup for a long time. Like I said, for me and my purposes, it is a great compromise as far as bringing all the qualities I look for in a camera together, but really quality, it's very good. I've been very pleased with it. Hope this helps. If you guys enjoy this video, give me a like, subscribe, leave a comment. Any questions you may have, I'll be happy to answer. And we'll talk to you next time.